down to Biscayne.
Yikes. 5 on the floor, ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing, you can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars, wearing bubble frogs. Just like Butler said, you in trouble, y'all. Kept the flow playing, got it all band. Y'all seen the block, stop with one hand. And Pat, we trust, it's power, have the guts. We're here to bring the heat, y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, and Alex Toledo, plus others from the 5 Reasons Sports Network.
All right, welcome to 5 on the Floor live here on the 5 Reasons YouTube channel. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me, Ethan J. Skolnick, at 5 Reasons Sports. I got Brady Hawk. You can follow him at Brady Hawk 305. Alex Toledo, you can follow at Tropical Blanket. And Greg Sylvander, you can follow at Greg Sylvander. We'll get to all the specifics of this game in a second and to your comments. But before we do, want to mention our sponsors. Starting here with Prize Picks, use the code 5, F-I-V-E, get that initial deposit matched up to $100. You got to deposit the money to get the money, but then it's free money. That's how this works. So put down the code 5, F-I-V-E, upon your deposit, and you get it matched up to $100. They got more than just the NBA there. You can play the Stanley Cup playoffs. Panthers are going to be going to a game 5 in their series. You can play that. You can play MLB, MMA, golf, boxing, NFL futures. It's all on there. Go to prizepicks.com or the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store. We'll tell you about our other sponsors a little bit later in the program. Do want to get, though, to what happened tonight. The Miami Heat have their series extended. It's going to go 6 games now. Game 6 will be on Friday. We don't have a definitive time on that yet, although likely 7:30 or 8 o'clock in Miami. And a whole bunch of things happened tonight that honestly I don't think are sustainable for a game 6. And I'm going to start there. First thing, the Heat didn't play very well. And mostly they didn't shoot very well. And the poor shooting bled into the defense. But also, look, you didn't get playoff Jimmy tonight, and in part because I don't think Jimmy looked 100%. And that's not an excuse, but he looked like he was a decoy for a good portion of the game. He was not exploding off the ankle. I don't know if that had anything to do with Josh Hart getting in his airspace and kind of that particular play. I'm sure we'll find out more about that. But either way, he didn't look totally right today. And as far as the shooting goes, until Duncan Robinson started getting going, and with the exception of anything Max Strus was doing, the shooting looked a lot like it looked during the regular season before it kind of fixed itself in the playoffs against Milwaukee. And the reality is they haven't shot the ball that well in this series at all, actually. It's just that tonight was the night that it seemed to bleed into the defense. This game seemed a little bit desperate from Erik Spoelstra also, and we'll pivot to that as we go forward. I haven't seen him use the hack-a player in years. I can't remember the last guy he did it against. In fact, I've remembered him kind of criticizing that particular move in the past, although maybe I'm going crazy. But I believe he has in the past. And today he hacked Mitchell Robinson, and to be honest, it backfired. It looked like he was trying to protect some of his players as he was earlier in the zone. But Mitchell Robinson making the free throws got the crowd going a little bit, and you ended up giving up more points per possessions on those possessions than you would have if you had just played defense. So that kind of backfired. And then late, it was Duncan and more Duncan and more Duncan and more Duncan. And I understand it because he was the one guy that was getting going. But I do think if Jimmy was right tonight, there would have been more Jimmy late. And so that's, again, without making an excuse on it, it did look like he was 100% tonight. And so we will see over the course of the next 48 hours what happens. I'll go to you, Greg, first on this. Let's just get to the overall performance tonight. I thought this was kind of a C-plus performance from the Heat.
Yeah.
That almost was enough, but I wouldn't give it a better grade than that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not leaving this game feeling terribly troubled or panicked or anything like that. I will say when you see Jimmy only have 12 field goal attempts, he did get to the line. So, I mean, he was aggressive in his own way, but it wasn't the kind of Jimmy stuff that we're normally seeing. He wasn't as fluid with his movement. So the mobility is in question. And I ask, when did that happen? Because last I saw, he was dropping 28 and he looked fine. So I'm interested, like you said, to see how Jimmy looks in game 6. And if we hear anything about another kind of ailment that he may have. I thought Bam really played well for stretches tonight. It's good to see that a guy like Duncan Robinson is getting back in a groove, because back home, maybe that'll be something that they could build upon. So to me, this still boils down to, when you look at this team in New York, it's Barrett, it's Randall, and it's Brunson, and it's what they're doing individually. And if they can't get enough from those three guys, they don't have enough. And tonight they got enough. Brunson went off. The other two were respectable. And so that's what they have to limit. It's an outlier. To me, game 6 is where they'll close this out. But something to watch, and we can't run from it, is I just don't understand why Jimmy would look so different. It's not that he didn't play bad. He just played different.
You're muted. Still muted.
I always do that. Brady, you guys got to learn how to read my lips at this point. Brady, it looked to me like he played passively, like he was, again, trying to protect something. I don't know. It wasn't quite decoy-ish to the extent that it was when he first injured it, but it didn't look totally right tonight. Again, he had one field goal attempt through like the first 18 minutes of the second half. That's just not him.
No, 100%. I think the one part of it that I was hesitant about, the fact about his ankle, which it is definitely something bothering him, but I was saying to the extent of his burst, was that I thought he was excellent defensively in this game. Like, he was very good. Like, he was kind of their moving chess piece, and the reason they were getting a lot of looks that they wanted, it felt like, with the way they placed him off ball and they let him just help off shooters. It felt like he had like 5 steals or so in this game, even so. And he had a big block. But if he was doing certain things defensively where you're like, he looks like he has that burst, then he gets down to the other side of the floor and he was playing, like you said, he was playing in the corner. There was like the time where I was like saying to myself, like, oh, they need Kyle and Duncan here, because at the beginning of that fourth, because I was like, this is that bench lineup group that they usually have trouble with, kind of like they had in the beginning of the second quarter. And I'm like, wait, that's Jimmy in the corner. They didn't go to Highsmith the second half. That was Jimmy Butler sitting in the corner. And it's like, yeah, they just can't have that. And it felt like even when he was on ball, he was just out of sorts. Like, he had the one tough bucket late in the fourth where he got to the rim and he flipped it up. But like, every one of his shots did not feel like they were coming easy. The only one was probably out of that timeout late where he got into that pull up. But it was like, I don't know. He just did not seem like he was. It was the first time we've seen Jimmy Butler out of sorts, and it feels like a long, long time. Like, I don't remember the last. It's been over a month we've seen him look like that. So it was just a different dynamic. And then it obviously looks like that even more so when your shooting is that bad. Like, when you're shooting at that level and you're just throwing up brick after brick, and Max Strus, the only guy in your starting lineup that had a 3, had 4 of them, but he was only guy in your starting lineup. Love could not hit. Gabe could not hit. And it's like, yeah, it's making the Jimmy stuff look even more obvious that he's not being aggressive, because they just have nobody else to go to right now. And if it wasn't for Duncan saving the show, they would have looked a lot worse for him. So it was definitely a weird dynamic, but I think it's definitely something to look at with the ankle, because the question is, well, like, to Greg's point, did it happen during the game at some point? Mm-hmm. Maybe he tweaked it when he came down on that jumper or something like that, where it just started to bother him. Because I don't know. It seemed like even early in the game, it felt like he wasn't moving as bad as he was late, kind of toward the second, third quarter-ish.
We've talked about how good the role players are. We did a whole podcast on it yesterday. Love 0 of 7 from 3.
Did we jinx it?
We did. Love 0 of 7 from 3. Gabe 0 of 3 from 3. This was Gabe's worst game of the playoffs, actually, I thought, on both ends. I mean, Brunson's getting away with some stuff, but you got to expect that at this point. He's going to push off, and it's just something that they got to learn to deal with. But Kevin was not good tonight. And we mentioned Max was 4 of 10 from 3. Duncan was 5 of 10 from 3. That's 9 of 20. The rest of the team was 4 of 23. So, I mean, Lowry was 2 of 8 from 3 off the bench. I thought Caleb was okay tonight, but not super impactful. So, and then here's the other stat, Alex. We've talked about the rebounding all series. They were out rebounded. Some of this is missed shots, but I mean, they were out rebounded 50-34. I mean, that just told you. Honestly, I'm stunned they had a chance to win this thing. They really didn't do anything well.
And they doubled their free throws.
Right. Times. Well, and then but they missed free throws too. Like, Jimmy missed a couple big ones that as they were making a run, and it's just like they didn't do anything right. And on the other hand, I mean, Tibbs really did this tonight. He played Brunson and Grimes all 48 minutes, and then Grimes came up gimpy at the end of the game. That's not sustainable. When I look at everything that happened tonight, and I don't want to be called a homer for this, I don't, as long as Jimmy's healthy, I think the Heat close this thing out on Friday night. I mean, they played poorly. Tibbs went to a 7-man rotation, playing 2 guys the entire game. They got out rebounded. They didn't shoot well, and they were down 4 at the end of this thing, Alex.
Yeah, and that's kind of what it all comes down to here is they were playing from behind, and that's their own fault for the flaws that they showed in this game, specifically with their offense and how it can look when the shots are drastically not falling. Like, it's one thing to be average or bad. That was just awful. They ended up getting, they kind of brought the percentage up a little bit in the second half with Duncan doing his thing, but like they were around 17% from 3 for most of the game. Duncan and Max really took you out of it. But for a game where you got not very good scoring from Jimmy Butler, a game where you could not hit a 3 to save your life, you also didn't shoot well at the rim. 58% at the rim is not good. It's a 20th percentile in the league. You got out rebounded by 16, and that was all in the second half because it was almost even at halftime. And I think that's where you gave up the game. Like, you cannot let them get to all those second chance looks and all those second possessions that I think you'd let them get to. Like, the defensive principles and the game plan are all cool. You can execute that, but all of that goes to shit if you're just gonna, give them those second chance points. And I think the one thing that he did well tonight was the points off turnovers. They killed the Knicks in that aspect, which is always a good thing for them. It was a big part of their blueprint all season. Everything went wrong, and they still had a chance to win this game. I liked what they did where they were involving Brunson in so many actions on offense. They were really going at him with the Knicks showing and recovering him all the time. Grimes played a good game, but Jimmy just did not take advantage of him like he did in other games. Grimes is too small. He's a good defender for his size, good young defender in general. He made a big play there at the end with that steal that he got. He is way too small to guard Jimmy Butler. And that's where I'm just concerned, just making sure that Jimmy is good for Friday's game and going forward, because really, like, you did not get great scoring games from him or Bam. You couldn't make a 3. Like I said, they didn't finish well at the rim. You got doubled up in free throws, like Brady mentioned. You got out rebounded by 16. So almost everything outside of the points off turnovers and turnover battle went wrong. You were still able to be in striking distance at the end of the day.
Let's get to the hack Robinson here. I hate the strategy. I always have. I think to me it only makes sense if you're trailing by a lot, which they weren't at that stage. And what it showed to me, I'll go back to Brady on this, and then after the break we'll project forward a little bit. What it showed to me was Spo just didn't trust his core defense tonight, right? Because typically he would try. I mean, they've gotten into plenty of games this season by just playing defense and winning these clutch games without resorting to that stuff. And he's not like an Andre Drummond level free throw shooter. He's not good, but he's not awful. His form is okay.
That thing is ugly.
Well, I mean, when he made the 2, see, I hate doing it in the other building too. I've always been of the theory, if you're going to do it, you do it at home. You do it on the road. If the guy makes a couple, first thing, it gets the crowd into it anyway, because it draws everybody's attention to it. And then if the guy makes a couple, you have what you had there, which is that the MSG crowd starts rallying behind Mitchell Robinson, and it gave them more energy. It just wasn't Spo-like to me. Like
Ethan, one real quick
trust.
One thing real quick before Brady gets in there, like to your point, the half court defense stuff and Spo not trusting it. You got 88 points combined between their 3 best players on 52% shooting from the field, 27 to 52. So, I mean, that should tell you about their half court defense.
And I understand that, and all of that from Randall came after the first quarter because he was 1 of 7 and he was 1 of 7 in the first. But I still don't. I mean, your defense has carried you for large portions of the season down the stretch of games. They won clutch games this year because of their defense and their free throw shooting, and because Jimmy would make a play at the end. And when Tyler was playing, sometimes he made a few of them. Brady, I don't like it. I don't know why he did it, honestly.
I mean, I'll say first, it's one of those things that you either look like a genius or an idiot, like after the fact. Like it's literally one of those things you throw out there, and it's like you look one way or the other. But it definitely says it says a lot about their half-court defense. It says a lot about what Brunson was doing in this game specifically, the fact that he was just breaking people down and getting to whatever spot he wanted to. And we talked about that in comparison to Jimmy before, the way he can get to his spots. Like Brunson was just absolutely carving them up in certain parts of this game. It didn't matter where the help came down from. Like he was just finding areas to get shots off. And the other part of this is Duncan Robinson being probably your best offensive player for a good portion of the time. Keeping him on the floor means you have to overextend defensively. So it's like they're going to put him in every action defensively. They know that they're going to have to overcommit possession after possession down the stretch because they're keeping him on the floor. So that reason is why I think he went to it mostly, is because they knew what they were going to have to do. It wasn't like they were throwing an extra defender in there for Duncan. If that was the case, then you're obviously leaning in the man-on-man stuff. But that was definitely felt uncharacteristic for him specifically. But Ethan, I'll throw something back at you real quickly on another topic, because I thought it was interesting. You mentioned Jimmy they played high minutes over there in New York. Jimmy plays 43 minutes. He plays the entire second half. The one thing I've been curious about is why they're so willing to play Jimmy for an entire second half for all these minutes, but not Bam.
Right.
It's a weird dynamic to me. And it's like they talked about preserving Jimmy and getting him to this point, but it's like Bam's the younger guy. Bam's the guy. And I know he's dealing with injuries, but so is Jimmy. It's a weird scenario that I can't really figure out. So it's like he ends up playing 39 minutes, and I know it's still, but playoff time right now at this time, it felt like he should at least be getting the whole second half almost. It's like those Cody Zeller minutes, he has had good moments, but it's like, at least defensively especially, it feels like they need to play him kind of aligned with Jimmy, right?
Well, okay, so let's look at the minutes overall here, because I think you make a good point. So Jimmy plays 43, Bam played 39, Kyle played 31 off the bench, Caleb played 28, Strus played 26. I mean, the surprising minutes were the Duncan minutes, right? 22, Vincent 23, and Love played only 16 because he wasn't making shots tonight. Highsmith and Zeller got 12 combined. Look, I'm with you. I don't really understand it, because to me, Bam has looked healthier lately. It's looked like whatever was bothering him, the shoulder, the hamstring, it has. I thought he had a really good game today that could have been more impactful, but they kind of forgot about him again at times. I don't think this was necessarily on him. He ended up with 18, 8, and 2. He ended up with 5 fouls. And the other decision I didn't like tonight, and because I always say this, and somebody put it totally properly on Twitter, in my view, I hate when coaches foul their own guy out. It was pretty damn clear that Kyle Lowry was out playing Gabe Vincent today, right? Are we in agreement on that?
Yes.
It's sort of been game to game, but Kyle outplayed Gabe today, right?
Yes.
So why, when he picks up the 5th foul, do you put him on the bench and essentially shelve him?
I've never
then
understood
you
that.
don't get what you need from him at the end of the game. Why not just wait until he fouls out? Okay, so he fouls out, then you go to Gabe. I don't like, and that's another one. Spoelstra doesn't always do that either. It's kind of 50-50 on that. There are some coaches who religiously, guy gets 5 fouls, they put him on the bench, and they basically bench their own guy. I don't get it. See, sitting Kyle was a huge mistake. Do we agree on that? Because I didn't. This isn't a second guess. This was a first guess. I didn't like it at the time.
100% agree. I think that this was a game that the more it unfolded, I don't know. They're going to take care of this in 6. It was not anybody's best night. They were not as sharp. And there's a difference between a team that's fighting for their life and a team that's up 3-1. And we saw those differences, and they're around the margins. And that's kind of the way that we saw. But I think that the Heat will come out with a much different disposition after getting this game, kind of getting smacked in the mouth. So that's the good thing, because I feel like this is as good as New York can play. And Miami was still hanging around for most of the game.
Right. I mean, Brunson had 38 tonight. And by the way, I know not everybody was watching both games, but I was trying to. The same exact stuff happened in the Panther game. You talk about desperation, same exact stuff happened. Panthers, lackadaisical effort. Their stars didn't really show up tonight. And they let Toronto get ahead, and then they kind of made a charge and didn't do enough late. It was the exact same game. Toronto was down 3-0. The Knicks were down 3-1. This kind of stuff happens in series. I still think the Panthers are going to close that out eventually, and because it would be historic if they don't, because there's only 4 teams in the NHL history that have not closed out a 3-0 series. And I think that the Heat do close this out on Friday, again, depending on Jimmy, and we'll talk about this after the break. If they don't get game 6, then all of a sudden this whole momentum thing is flipped. And then the Garden will be a different animal in a game 7 up there. And you just do not want to deal with that. We do want to mention a couple of our sponsors, especially because one of them is here in the comments. I want to make sure that we mention her, our friend Lynette. Check out at insurancebylynette.com. There she is, 954-581-8800. 8800. I've told you, Lynette, you're going to be on the stage with us here at some point, so prepare. 954-581-8800. Go to insurancebylynette.com. That's 2 N's, 2 T's. Get your life insurance, your renter's insurance, all kinds of different insurance, especially car insurance there. If you don't have a great driving record, Lynette can certainly help you with that. Based kind of, what would I say, Lynette? Sort of the North Lauderdale area, a little bit west. But again, can service the entire area here. 954-581-8800. Give her a call, talk heat, and get your insurance taken care of. Also, we do want to mention one more sponsor here, Water Cleanup of Florida. You can find them at WCUFL.com. That's WCUFL.com. If you've got any kind of a leak in your house, they'll take care of it immediately. Michael Robert and his entire team. Reach out to him at 561-408-7835. That's 561-408-7835. They also do the preventative service for you. They got a new program here where they will essentially take care of everything before it happens, which is certainly something you want to do. If you live in Broward County, particularly downtown Fort Lauderdale, where Brady and I were essentially taking boats to see each other, you know that the floods can come here in South Florida at any time. So go to Water Cleanup of Florida, WCUFL.com. I want all three of you in on this. If you've got the schmutz,
They got
They
the
got the
guts.
Got the
there you
guts.
go. All right. So let's talk guts as we go forward here. I don't think Spoelstra needs to make, and thank you, Lynette. We appreciate that. I don't think that they need to make drastic adjustments going into the next game, right? I mean, you don't overreact to Brunson getting 38, right? You don't. But Alex, is there one adjustment? I mean, they got to shoot better. That's not an adjustment. And Jimmy's ankle, that's not an adjustment. So what does Spoelstra do? Or if Jimmy is hobbled but plays on Friday, is there an adjustment that you do need to make there, particularly defensively?
Well, yeah. I mean, look, there's a couple ways that this can go. I mean, you just got to see what's going on with Jimmy. Assuming he's playing, I don't think there's any major adjustment that needs to be made. In fact, I like some of the things that they were leaning into offensively tonight as far as the actions with, like I mentioned before, just kind of revving up even more the actions involving Jalen Brunson, making him defend. And I think they've really taken advantage of him overall this series, and that's one of the biggest reasons Max has gotten off, because he's often on Max. More of that, that's great. I love the way that they engage Mitchell Robinson a little bit more. The past couple of games, I think he is prone to foul trouble. You want to bring him up into space offensively. And I think mostly what you saw tonight, this is the first game where Thibodeau's game plan has really worked out for his team. Because I think they've done a decent job, the Knicks have overall, of enforcing their game plan, where they're really sending the help towards the paint. And the Heat have done a good job countering with just the extra ball movement and really leaning into that stuff. I think tonight they did a little bit too much, specifically Jimmy Butler. I think so many opportunities for him, even with all the bodies that are being sent there. And yes, there are very short windows where he has somebody one-on-one. It's like a second or less, because they're not actual windows with how many bodies they're sending at him. He's got to do a better job of finding the creases, initiating contact the way that he usually does. He just told me last game, and it could have been a bluff, right? It could have been a bluff, but he just told me last game he loves getting double teamed and that he wants to see if he can score over the double teams. We know that he can find those creases. Yes, that's the thing. He was looking like Bam in some of those. No disrespect towards Bam. I'm just saying, like, there was times where he wasn't even looking. And you guys know me. I'm a Bam defender till the end. But, like, he is supposed to be the primary scorer. He's got to look at the rim. And even if they're going to send all those bodies, you have to actually collapse first. He did it sometimes, and he really left his mark on the other stuff. Like, he did a great job defensively, like Brady mentioned. Did a good job playmaking and rebounding. All that stuff was great. There was some off-ball buckets. Overall, Jimmy has to be more aggressive and at the very least getting into the paint and collapsing. And he's got to get more shots up. Like that mid-range shot he had in the fourth quarter was a perfect example. There was a second window where he had, was it Grimes one-on-one there? And he just, went up and took that shot. He's got to do a little bit more of that.
I want to address a couple things in the comments here because I'm going through them. Okay, let's start here. Jimmy being up, drinking wine, or posting on IG is not the reason that he struggled tonight. Trust me, there are a lot worse things that he and other guys could be doing and have done before playoff games. All right, the other thing is he's not point shaving or anything like that. Essentially, Okay, I think I don't think he felt comfortable in the ankle. I don't, because to me he doesn't. I understand there have been games this season where he's been not that aggressive and he passes out of shots and all that, but he hasn't been doing that in the postseason, and they clearly wanted to end it tonight. It just looked like he didn't have confidence in it for whatever reason. And again, the Spoelstra's not going to talk about it. Jimmy's not going to talk about it. He's going to be put probably on the injury report as questionable, okay, which he was tonight, I believe. And we'll basically find out right before game time what the situation is. So I don't think this was anything about anything other than him being in some discomfort tonight. And again, I'm not going to excuse the rest of the performance for the loss, okay? They did not play well enough tonight. They were not on point, particularly at the start of the third quarter. To me, that's where this thing started to go away. They could have imposed their will on them, gotten the crowd out of it. We had Brian Fonseca there on scene today, and he was saying they were booing Randall when he came back into the game after his first stint. The Heat could not build on that momentum tonight, and that was the problem. And then once the crowd started to get into it, and then I hated the Mitchell Robinson hacka thing at the end of the game, the crowd got really into it. Miami seemed rattled. Lowry picks up the fifth foul. Spo takes him out. And look, the thing with Duncan Robinson is this, and I give Duncan great credit for staying ready the same way I used to give James Jones great credit for staying ready. And I even said Duncan should take every shot here. But the problem is it gets them out of what they have done, right? Because Duncan has not been a featured part of the offense for the entire year. And so then it's like when Duncan missed a couple and he had a couple that swirled in and out and he had one on the break, they can't get back to what they usually do. And it felt like they got out of sorts. Bam got forgotten. Jimmy wasn't being aggressive, and they couldn't kind of get over the hump. Combination of things that happened tonight. Greg, as you look ahead to the next game, you feel they're going to close it out. I feel they're going to close it out, provided that Jimmy's healthy. But is there anything concerning tonight?
I mean, the only thing would be Jimmy not looking at the basket, and if that is something that we're going to see a ton of in Game 6, how they adjust. I just think Spoelstra now is going to go back to the drawing board on how he defends Randall, Brunson, and Barrett, but primarily Brunson. And I think that they can do some different things. And if any of the shooting can just get a little bit of a spike back home, I feel like they close it out. It's watching Jimmy early for me. That'll be the biggest thing going into Game 6 that I'll be watching for, because that's the element, right? If Jimmy all of a sudden doesn't look like playoff Jimmy, then this is a new series. But if they can just close this out and give Jimmy another week to rest, that would be huge. And then let's hope Philly and Boston go for 7. So,
well, that's the other part of this. You kind of blew an opportunity here to get Jimmy and Bam some extra rest if you end up closing this thing out before the next round. Our guy Gad tweeted this out. I saw you put this in our chat. Greg, Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo combined for the same amount of field goal attempts, 23, as Duncan Robinson and Kevin Love, 23. Not a winning formula. It was their only formula to get back in the game in the second half because Duncan started to get it going. But the other thing about it, Brady, was because Duncan started to get it going, Spoelstra didn't play the other guy who had it going a little bit, was Max. So it was kind of one or – because you couldn't play them both defensively, right? But it kind of became one or the other with nobody else scoring.
And I feel like that's the balance that we've been talking about all season, the regular season. It was like certain nights, there was never consistency on either end during the regular season. It was like some nights they had the shooting, some nights they didn't have the defense, some nights it was the opposite. It was like, that's what this felt like. It was like, this didn't feel like a scenario where you were going to lean defense, but it did not feel like a scenario where you could put both of your shooters out there and then let Brunson pick your poison on which guy he wanted to be his screener. So it was like you had to pick one. Even though Max had the hot start, it definitely felt like the way Duncan ended that quarter, they definitely had to stick with him. They just had to. And I thought they got good things out of it. I thought it was funny, actually. They ran the exact same play like the entire final 6 minutes of the fourth quarter. They just kept running the same double drag. Jimmy as a ball handler, Duncan and Bam screening. And it was like, that's what they got the Jimmy pull-up out of the timeout with. That was what they got so many looks with. And it was like, I thought at times they were getting good looks out of it. And it was just, that's why it really comes back to this. As much as we want to focus on all these things, it was like, Miami just didn't play well. It's really that simple. So we can sit here and look into this move by Spoelstra to do the hack of Robinson or different parts of the game. But it was like, Jimmy didn't play well and the shooters didn't play well. And if that happens, you're not going to win most basketball games. And somehow they were in it because of the defense and the fact that the Knicks seem to just play themselves into those situations sometimes. But they had no business being in that position, to be honest, with the way they played early in the game. So that's where I think there's a certain level of confidence heading into Game 6 because you probably say to yourself, even with the injury, you're not going to see that Jimmy Butler again. And ideally, I guess you wouldn't shoot like that again. But the funny thing is, like we've been saying, this is what did they end up at? They ended up at 30%, which is pretty much around where they've been all series. That's where these things get weird. But I just feel like it was just so loud the way they shot in this game. Like there's the past games where I know it's because they won and we could say that. But when they didn't shoot well in these past games, you didn't even realize it. Like you were kind of like, oh, because everything else was flowing so naturally, and that's probably the Jimmy factor. It was just kind of demoralizing, like in a lot of ways, with the way that the shooting was going. Like they were just guys like Love just kept getting shots up.
Well, this was the one game where the offense bled into the defense, and that's the thing that Jimmy talked about during the regular season, where they weren't shooting the ball well, and then it would affect them on the other end. They did create some turnovers tonight. That wasn't so much the problem, but just that certain points of the game where they needed to be on point, they weren't. And they let Brunson get to certain spots that they hadn't let him get to. When he gets into the lane and he can make those little push shots, that's a problem. They have to. I don't think they have to overreact to it. Levi
build
says,
the wall,
ankle to Jimmy,
like the Giannis wall.
Yeah, I don't think they have to overreact to it, but I do think that there needs to be some adjustment here. But look, Tibbs going to play Brunson 48 minutes a game. He's going to. I don't think Quickly is going to be back for the next game because he's been doubtful for the last two and has sat. He doesn't trust any of his backup guards. I know Fournier, I guess, was sick tonight, so that wasn't even an option. But he didn't play Rose. He didn't play McBride. He's just going to ride these guys, and I think eventually it's going to catch up to them. I think it probably catches up to them Friday, and I think if we see a better Jimmy game, I think they're going to win this one.
The Heat open as 4.5-point favorites on Better Edge. Use the code 5
There you go.
RSN.
Better Edge. Use code 5 RSN. That's right. We hear about it. People are asking if we're going to hear from Jimmy about today's game. I don't think Jimmy, when he's banged up, typically doesn't talk. We'll see if they drag him out to the podium tonight or if he does it in locker room. The setup in New York, they did bring 3 players out the last time in addition to Spo. Spo's already talked and apparently did not really say a whole lot about Jimmy's situation. They're not going to talk about it. They don't like to talk about injuries. This comes in for Jason Myers. Knicks were desperate on their home floor. You got to bring it up another level to close out a team on the road, and we didn't. It's not like we've been shooting lights out. They were not, I'll just say it again, they just were not on point in a bunch of different areas tonight. Spoelstra knew it, and that's why he got gimmicky late in the game, basically, which was lots of Duncan Robinson and hacking Mitchell Robinson. Not an ideal formula. They got kind of close. I never felt like tonight, though, they were going to get over the hump, whereas other nights I have. So we'll see what happens on Friday night. Alex Brady and I guess we're going back to the arena. Probably should leave now. It means Greg will be hosting the show on Friday night. Thanks to our sponsors, insurancebyLynette.com. Of course, she's here with us. Water Cleanup in Florida. You got the schmutz. They got the guts. And Prize Picks. Use the code 5, FIVE. Have a good night, everybody. The world is not ending. I think they close it out Friday.